The Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Lands, Border Protection, Veterans Affairs, and Procurement calls this public hearing to order. It is now 1:02 p.m. on Tuesday, September 27, 2016. Present today with me is, to my right, Senator Frank B. Aguon. To my left is Senator Jimmy Espaldon, and to his left is Senator Mary Torres. Thank you very much for being here today. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive testimony on Bills 342-33 related to automatic traffic safety enforcement. Bill number 351, introduced by Senator Frank B. Aguon, related to providing hazardous pay differential for customs officers. Bill number 355, introduced by Senator Frank B. Aguon, relative to the creation of a Bill of Rights for renewable energy customers. And Bill 363, introduced by Senator Dennis G. Rodriguez, relative to requiring the electric utility to develop and file a proposed community-based renewable energy tariff for virtual net metering, subject to Public Utilities Commission approval and for related purposes. This public hearing notice was provided to senators, stakeholders, and legal media, and has met the requirements of the open government law. The public hearing is also being broadcast on local television. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. Tuesday, October 4th. Please address testimony to Senator Thomas C. Ada, committee chairperson, and it can be dropped off at the legislature's mailbox or emailed to office@senatorada.org. We'll go ahead and we'll start with the first bill, Bill 342-33, and I'll ask Senator, the sponsor of the bill, to briefly introduce the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is concerning Bill 342. And Bill 342 basically intends to curb the behavior of drivers who choose to run red lights and endanger the lives of others while doing so. It's not meant to be a cash cow for the government, nor is it meant to be a means for well-connected persons to make money. In fact, if this program is implemented and its revenue stream declines after the initial 1 to 3 years, we actually may be achieving what is intended, and that's to change drivers' behavior on this island. I have read the comments from those who have already made known their opinions on this bill. To be clear, Bill number 342-33 intends to authorize DPW to issue a request for information, RFI, from interested parties who can install, operate, send out notices of citation, and administer and maintain cameras at certain identified intersections. It's an RFI, request for information. It's not a request for proposal at this juncture. While this legislation is offered to make our intersections safer, I am open to any changes that may make the legislation stronger and more effective. One possible avenue to pursue is the lengthening of the yellow light's duration. I have written to DPW and asked if this change can be made as an interim step towards my goal of changing certain drivers' behavior. Another possible change is to make certain that any contract entered into with an agent is on a fixed fee basis, which means that that agent would be paid an amount to recoup the initial investment plus reasonable amounts for maintenance and profit over the term of the contract. This approach has been recommended as a means to avoid the types of situations which have occurred in other jurisdictions where an operator was paid on the number of citations issued. I believe this program could be implemented in concert with the deploying of other means to change drivers' behaviors and to make our people safer as we transit Guam's intersections and as the traffic conditions actually increase on this island. Let's not wait for the next tragedy to take place before we attempt to curb the behavior of drivers choosing to run red lights and to commit other traffic violations. However, I am looking forward to any testimony that comes before us today to try to either strengthen or give some points of views that we haven't considered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Espaldon. Signing up to provide testimony is Mr. Glenn Leon Guerrero, the Director of DPW. Mr. Leon Guerrero.
Half a day. Chairman Atta, Senator Underwood, Senator Aguon, Senator Espaldon, Senator Torres, Senator Morrison. Thank you for the opportunity for me to provide testimony on Bill 342, an act to establish an automated traffic safety enforcement program on designated highways. The following are the department's comments. I've got basically 3 comments. One is safety, as Senator Espaldon was pointing to. The program is commonly referred to as the red light enforcement. The automated safety enforcement program, specifically red light enforcement at traffic signals, is one of many corrective measures that have been used to improve safety at intersections that have been identified in the jurisdictions in the United States. They were identified as high crash locations. The first step in improving safety at intersections is to study where the crashes are happening, what type of crashes there are, if any. The reason that this is important is because red light enforcement has been shown to reduce 2 specific types of crashes: the broadside crashes and left turn approaches crashes, which are in a lot of the jurisdictions that they implement them. They're done because of fatalities, high serious injuries. Guam really doesn't have that. Almost always, though, rear-end type crashes represent the highest number of crashes at signalized intersections. And these type of crashes are generally increased when you have the red light enforcement. Another way to think about this is if a few or no broadside or left turn approach crashes, what I mentioned, and a number of rear-end crashes, implementation of red light running will actually increase the number of crashes at the intersection. The studies have shown that that increases about anywhere between, on an average, about 20%. The following are the crash data for the highest number of recorded crashes at the reported at Guam signaled intersections for the last 4 years. And the highest is at McCreadie and Marine Corps Drive. This is the one near Winchell's in Dededo. And second highest is also in Dededo in the Sangsong Road. And then at St. John's, and then after that would be down in Tumon, down at Guma Tranquilidad. And then the number 5, that one Jacinto, that's Simon Sanchez. And then Army Corps, I just threw that in. That's not actually top 5, but it's our top 6. But it was. I just wanted to give you a comparison of what we're looking at. So we're looking at anywhere between 98 crashes for a total of 4 years versus 15 at the tri-intersection. One improvement we would like to recommend is that in many mainland jurisdictions have canceled the red light enforcement programs due to citations not being able to withstand the challenges in court. DPW recommends that the following section, we're adding another section, 33A02D, be added, and that would be that before any citations are issued under this program, an officer of the Guam Police Department will certify that a traffic violation did in fact occur, and that officer would be the person responsible for the issuance of that citation. Then you asked about how much it would cost, and I'll answer the other question about the yellow light as well. So the red light enforcement programs are expensive to install. Equipment to install equipment, maintain equipment, and process the violations. Approximate cost for installation widely varies depending on the number of traffic movements to be enforced. So if you, in the bill, you're looking at not just red light, but you're also looking at seat belt, you're looking at car seat, you're looking at cell phone or distracted driving. A simple system, not with all those bells and whistles, simple system that might enforce left turns at a major intersection may cost as much as about $250,000, just installation per intersection. In addition, a system must be in place in which violations are processed from when the cameras detect the violation to verify sufficient information to generate a violation. and then sending out the violation. Jurisdictions that have successfully implemented automated enforcement systems using existing funds and staff to reduce costs. Jurisdictions that have not been successful have hired outside vendors to install and maintain equipment, and Senator Espaldon clearly illustrated that, because what they needed to do to recoup their costs and to maintain a profit was they were charging anywhere between $500 to $600 a ticket. In the law, you actually said it's $130. So I've also put a table on how much it'll cost per offense for first offense and a second offense. Red light running is anywhere between $60 to $80. Speeding is obviously, depending on speed, $8 a mile for every speed above the speed limit. Cell phone is $100. Seatbelt is $100. Car seats are $100. So therefore, if you look at the payback for the cost of installation at one intersection, you're roughly looking at 2,500 citations just to cover the cost of installation, not the cost of operation. Our consultants have indicated that, and you also pointed to that if we successfully do this and we've curbed our driving habits, and I do want to say this, that it is, however, noteworthy to indicate that it would take strong political will to set aside capital, saying, I'm talking about $1.5 million, to finance the installation for four intersections and bring our island to the 21st century and relieve our GPD officers to perform other much-needed work. Please know that DPW does not have the funds to support this program at this time, and so we are currently requesting new money be appropriated to implement this program. And thank you for the opportunity to testify. Now, you also mentioned in your letter you sent to us, Senator, about increasing the yellow light by a second. You have to understand that an intersection has, it's 24 hours times 60 minutes and times 60 seconds. All of that is factor. When you take a second away, when you add a second to the yellow light, you're taking a second away from either a green or you're taking it away from another intersection. What our traffic engineers highly recommend, and it's done throughout the nation, is you want to have the yellow light so that everybody knows how long it takes. Actually, when you approach the intersection and it turns yellow, you're supposed to stop. We obviously don't do that. And so I applaud Senator Espaldon's initiative to want to curb and have our intersections safer, and we would like to do whatever we can to see that this does succeed. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I'll take a look at that testimony, the written testimony. I just want to make, I need to inquire. You're saying that those jurisdictions who do have such a system have actually experienced a 20% increase in crashes because of the red light camera?
Yes, because they know that they're going to get a ticket, so they stop abruptly and they get hit from behind.
Okay. And I've heard that out in the public also, that this may actually cause more crashes than we experience without this red light enforcement.
Right. So the give and take is, again, the reason why they put them in is because of fatalities and serious crashes, right, serious injuries. So the give and take is, I'd rather get a rear end and see that increase, but I'm going to see a reduction in fatalities and serious injuries. Okay. We don't have that, but what I'm agreeing with you is we do need to curb our culture in coming to intersections, because it's not safe. It's not safe for people to run 3 or 4 cars after the lights are actually even red.
Yeah, and I have gotten a lot of input on that as well. That there are those who are saying, and I witnessed myself where light turns red, you got 3 or 4 cars just running right through it, and that in itself also delays the traffic coming from other directions. It causes for backup. But getting to the issue of the yellow light, Do you know what the timing is on that? How many seconds does a yellow light run?
The yellow light is basically, I don't know I don't have it off the top of my head, Senator. I can get that for you easily.
Okay.
But we run yellow lights in different jurisdictions. It's dependent upon your roads. Our roads are closer to rural as opposed to, big major intersections. So they give obviously longer yellow lights for longer turns, and our turns aren't that long. But
Okay.
I can give you that information. I don't have that right off the top of my head.
Okay.
All I know is that if we do that, what my consultants have said and other people that I've talked to in other conferences that have successfully implemented the program, they said, yeah, you can increase the yellow. Yes, it'll allow more cars to go in, but at the end of the day, you're not changing a culture in driving habits. They're still going to run it.
That's right. You give them more time to run it.
Yeah, you have more people to run, yeah.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I guess one of the issues that's associated with this is that, we come across intersections, busy intersections, where the timing on the lighting is not proper. I mean, there are times, and is that perhaps one of the issues that DPW needs to perhaps control a little bit better? Because one example, sitting at the ITC intersection, coming from Aguon towards Dededo, turning into Tamuning, and we all know there's a lot of traffic that tries to turn up towards GPO. There have been enough instances where you're waiting in line, and then when the light turns green, you only see 4 or 5 cars go through, and then it turns red.
Yeah.
It's like, and so I'm just wondering, how does this all come down together in terms of the coordination of the traffic flow and traffic lights?
Very, very, very good question. I've asked that, and so I had to ask my engineers, can you dumb it down for me so that I can understand what we're doing? First of all the intersections, if we were in a perfect world, would be all synchronized. They're all tied to what's called a world clock. A world clock is what it is. It's a world clock that's synchronized with the world. But that's not. It's not tied into the synchronization of the lights. All that does is it gives us a reference. So if we have a power outage, or if there's a surge, or if there's something happening within the system, it has and it's frequent. That our lights, theoretically, we should be able to run 35 miles an hour at the speed limit to go through all our speed lights, signal lights. But again, there are situations, and for Guam, this is something that we're going to address. We're addressing all our signal lights. We have two phases to implement that, but just letting you know. So that's one thing. So we have situations where we're seeing this light is not synchronized with Chief Kapua light, which is not synchronized with 1 and 8. And so we have to go there and constantly get it so that we're all singing from the same song sheet. That's one issue. The second issue is, we're currently in political season, so we have a lot of people waving, and when you press that PED button, what that does is we time so that vehicles get through intersections faster than people. So once you hit a PED button or hit the pedestrian button, now you've extended the time, so that kind of throws everything off until we get back and cycled in. That's another reason why, especially around places where people are hitting the PED button. ITC is one, Chief Kapua is another, and then the third issue is that when we've looked at Guam cycles, we have morning rush hour, evening rush hour, lunchtime, and then weekends. So there are times when we actually realize that more traffic needs to go through Marine Corps, that's for an example, as opposed to going into 14 or to Chalon, San Antonio, or someplace into Muña. So those, when we change the cycles, I've got calls from Senator Atta. He said that it's flashing. And sometimes what it does is it flashes, then it stops flashing because it's telling us that it's changing. And it's not supposed to do that, but it does flash, and it's basically changing cycles from rush hour to regular mode and back, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a third mode of why the signal lights don't seem to be quote-unquote working correctly. And then the fourth is, obviously, it's not working correctly. So we go out there, we only have four. We have four traffic engineers that actually go out and do this. This is 24/7 that we have to work and send our guys out to fix the lights.
Thank you. I guess just to be clear, I have no more questions, but except this one. I'm not really sure from your testimony where the department stands on this. And as a director,
yeah, so I would say, Senator,
beneficial or not?
well, absolutely. But again, this is why I put it back on your shoulders. And 1.5 is what I'm asking for to make this, even to do a pilot study or to do a pilot program. I have the traffic monitoring systems in my office. I just need to tweak that to get that up and running. But 1.5, you're talking general fund money. That's a policy decision. And
Okay.
and again, I applaud you guys for saying, hey, let's get into the 21st century. Because you're right. If we do that and we eat it now, we take the cost in the chin now. In the long run, it stands to benefit us.
I know that you had a meeting off island in Hawaii, and I think probably even the mainland sometime, and probably even raise this issue. I guess the question is, aside from the funding coming from the general fund, are there other jurisdictions that allow the private operator to invest in it, knowing that he's going to get a return on his investment? Maybe not over 30 years, but probably within a shorter time frame, 5 years maybe.
Right.
And so it's not a direct impact on our general funds, but more it will be paid forward by perhaps a percentage of the monies, the revenues that come in from the citations. Is that a possible alternative to the financing aspect?
Very, very possible. But again, we're not talking, again, from our consultants, we haven't done this study. We're just back
Okay.
at the envelope guessing, saying that we don't see, we'll see, because let me take two steps back. When my consultant came to Guam, he was told, if you don't run the yellow light or the red light, people are gonna blow their horn and be irate, and he was absolutely right. So we realize that that's a wrong culture, that's the wrong mindset, but we're also saying that we don't have we're not going to see the traffic volume enough to generate to just again back of the envelope. We're not seeing that it would be possible for us to pay that back. So that's why I said it's going to be a resolve from this body to say, yes, we really do want it, and we're willing to take it in the chin or absorb general fund costs and stuff like that because we believe it's something that's good for the island. I believe it's good for the island, but I don't have all the stuff that you have that allows me to weigh it.
In this bill, this is, again, and I mentioned it in my opening statement, this basically authorizes you to go out and put out a request for information. It is not a bill to mandate that you go down this road. So the bill calls for, again, just that.
Yeah.
For DPW, collect as much information. Because you have not done the studies, this is that opportunity to really inform yourselves as to going further whether this is implementable or not. On that basis alone, then, it's not really upon us just yet, to throw it back in our court and say, well, figure out what it's going to cost. Because really, this bill only calls for a request of interest,
Sure.
And information, basically, on what is out there.
And Senator, I would like to propose this. I've already extended to you and other members of this body. Be happy to work out wherever you want to go. The best jurisdictions I know are in the East Coast. If you're in San Diego, we can certainly put you in municipalities that actually have it. Hawaii started theirs. They pulled it back. They pulled it back for two reasons. My understanding is one, it wasn't these tickets weren't issued by police officers. Two, I guess there was a law bill, and when they saw the disruption of what was happening, the law. The legislature pulled it back, and so they it never went through. They do have the infrastructure to do it. They have several places I've seen it, and the systems they have are phenomenal. They're good. But as I said, they started it and then they pulled it back. I think they ran it for a few months and then they pulled it down.
Okay.
Many jurisdictions are doing that, have started and then pulled it back because you're charging $600 or $300 and you're just lining the pockets of the vendors. And so successful municipalities that allow for that $400 or $500 the charge fee, if you will, the money the excess money goes to things like hospitals or schools or something like that, where it's obviously not lining the vendor's pocket. You're right, they cap it off, and then the extra money, because people are violating, they should be fined, go to just the utilities that you feel are needed. And then the last recommendation that I've seen in best practice is that no matter if we do put this in, that we should probably have an audit given out every year so that this program is audited and it stays above board.
I appreciate all your recommendations. I appreciate your testimony. Gives us something to think about as we, contemplate this bill. And you're right, it's upon us to make a decision ultimately. But thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Torres, do you have any questions? Senator Morrison? Senator Rodriguez? Senator Underwood? Okay. I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Have there been any studies that would indicate what the payback period will be for this investment, just purely in terms of dollars? So if the system is installed, the projected number of hits in terms of citations and the amount of fines collected will pay for the system over a period of...
Yeah, we haven't done that. We can do that, and that will be part of the RFI that we can work on. I'm sorry. What I'm proposing, senators, is that before we even go here, I'm happy to do more legwork with you, introduce you to more jurisdictions, see what they're doing that are doing well, and come up with a more kind of a roundtable type deal, and we could formulate a bill, have GPD at the table. I think that we can have if it's something that you really want to get across the line, I'm happy to help you.
And then the final question that I have is, what impact might this have on the court system? So if the system is pretty effective and these people then come in to basically try and fight their case, I mean, that's going to be a flood of people coming into the courts. Have there been any studies, do you know of, as to...
Yes, and that's why I said the officer in successful jurisdictions, it's an officer, a GPD officer in our case, one that's maybe on light duty or something like that can stay in front of the monitor and look and says, okay, this is something that the vendor's showing us that there's a violation. He looks and he verifies it, and then he presses the button and the ticket goes out. That's what the other successful jurisdictions have done. Because again, you're who's this guy? And when they get challenged in court, some good lawyer or they come up and they say, what's your expertise? What's your basis? And then they'll just trip them up so jurisdictions have actually pulled it out because it wasn't somebody that was qualified to issue out the violation.
Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions, so being that there's no other questions or testimony, then we'll consider Bill 342 as having been duly heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dungro.
Okay. The next bill is bill number 351, introduced by Senator Frank B. Aguon. Senator, if you'll introduce the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having the public hearing this afternoon. Mr. Chairman, we have a number of customs officers in the audience who are here primarily to see what the implications are of this legislation and how we would proceed. This is bill number 351 relative to providing for a hazardous pay differential for customs officers within the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency. In June earlier of this year, the Department of Administration came out with a finding, and rightfully so, Mr. Chairman, that in fact there's no written legal authorization for Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency personnel to be able to receive hazardous pay, with the exception of going through the regular process of on an annual basis, receiving certification from the Guam Division of Occupational Safety and Health over at Department of Labor. And that being the case, because there are inherent hazardous conditions in which our men and women in uniform in the Customs and Quarantine Agency have to endure during the course of their carrying out their responsibilities, they have requested that this legislation be introduced that would codify the allowance of Customs and Quarantine Agency officers to be able to receive hazardous pay. One thing I need to stress, Mr. Chairman, is that this particular proposal is budget neutral, and I need to emphasize that repeatedly because prior to the findings of DOA in June of 2016, customs officers were previously receiving hazardous pay. So that being the case, I look forward to the comments that will be provided. If you notice, one of the key provisions here, Mr. Chairman, very similar to the Guam Police Department's provision, is that Customs and Quarantine Agency will have to adopt a table of organization which would highlight specifically which positions would be eligible for hazardous pay. So it's not an allowance for carte blanche coverage, but an allowance based on the Director of Customs and Quarantine rendering that decision subsequent to the adoption of a table of organization. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Signing up to provide testimony is Major Philip Tyron and Major Darlene Murfallen. Okay, who's going to go first?
That'll be me, Senator.
Okay, please.
Hafide and good afternoon, Honorable Senator Tomas Siada and Honorable Senators of this esteemed committee. I beg your indulgence as my testimony is going to be quite lengthy. I shortened it from 24 pages to 12. I hope that helps our process. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm here today to testify in favor of Bill 351-33. I would like to thank you for prioritizing and setting the time to hear the proposed Customs Hazardous Pay Differential Bill. Prior to June of 2016, certain customs officers received compensation for hazardous duty. Historically, for close to 10 years, the agency was budgeted and paid hazardous pay differential for officers performing hazardous duty. During those times, the only officers receiving hazardous duty pay differential were customs officers performing work, boarding sea vessels, participating in drug raids, and maintaining custody and transport of arrestees. In June of 2016, the agency was budgeted to compensate hazardous pay differential for specific duties and positions previously certified and recognized as hazardous. However, responsible internal controls discovered the Government of Guam, Department of Labor, Occupational Safety and Health annual assessments and certifications for hazardous duty conditions were not properly recertified. Moving forward, I will refer to the Guam Occupational Safety and Health as GOSH for the rest of my testimony, if that's acceptable, of course, with you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hazardous pay differential ceased, but officers performing hazardous duty work did not. Because of our mandates at the border, customs officers continued to perform hazardous duty at our borders, minus the compensation. The budget supports the ability to compensate officers, but our financial controls do not. I think we can overcome this situation through legislation. Yet another problem is that only certain positions were originally assessed by our GOSH partners. Therein lies the paradox of the hazards our customs border security heroes face on a daily basis and the segregated view of the agency identified by GOSH as certified to receive hazardous pay differential. Through passage of this bill into law, the vexing inconsistencies within the agency concerning hazardous pay differential will be resolved. As instructed by the Acting Director of the Customs Agency, I would like to present a letter introducing our table of organization to the Honorable Chairman and his distinguished committee. I believe you have that in your possession.
Yes, yes.
Those of this committee and our public who are most familiar with Guam Customs would be surprised by the uncommon use of a table of organization by the Customs Agency. However, unlike our Guam Police Department colleagues, our table of organization is simply that, a table of organization, as opposed to the expanded table of organization and equipment, TO&E, used by our police department counterparts. Our intent was to present tools common to Guam law enforcement and the legislatura in Guam. I spoke of a paradox earlier and the opportunity for a solution. In the past, only specific customs officers were certified by GOSH, and we know today this process needs to be performed annually. Yet, many other customs officers wish for their positions to be annually reviewed and certified to receive just compensation for the hazardous duty they perform. It is no secret that Guam Customs border operations continue to evolve and expand to meet current day security threats. Our table of organization represents our officers' voices, and we seek the support of this esteemed body to pass this bill and provide resolution. As the guardian of the purse, I understand the legislatura in Guam's concerns with an across-the-board hazardous pay differential for all customs officers once they assume duty. I urge this body towards an extension and shift of that paradigm. As a society, we are no longer naive to the effects of terrorism, transnational crime, and the weaponizing and natural occurrence of contagious diseases leading to pandemics during border security operations. The events of 9/11 and the ensuing threats to national and local security bolster my plea for the approval of hazardous pay differential for all customs officers identified in the TOO. I am asking for this committee to transfer responsibility for hazardous duty compensation of customs officers through statute to the Director of Customs through passage of Bill 351-33. The Director of Customs is responsible for the budget of the Guam Customs Agency, and fittingly, the appropriated funding that currently exists to support 2016 hazardous pay differential. I'm asking for this body to approve the Director of Guam Customs' ability to retroactively compensate officers for hazardous duty work performed from June 2016 till the passage of Bill 351-33 into law for the hazardous duty they continue to perform to protect our borders and our people. Till this point, my appeal has been to the hearts of this esteemed body, but please allow me to come full circle from the perspective of hearts and minds in my testimony by appealing now to your minds and expertise in the application of controls. The TOO lists authorizations for hazardous pay differential for officers performing activities under various work activities. I'll start by listing them and then giving short explanations of what I feel are sufficient justification, at least from my perspective. During the time of detainee, suspect, or arrestee interview or interrogation, processing, detention, control, or transport. This is one of the examples of hazardous work activities that Guam Customs feels we should have our officers compensated for hazardous pay differential. This work activity was originally certified by GOSH, so I will not expand in this area. During the time of active boarding of conveyances, when assigned duty as boarding officer for aircraft or watercraft boarding, the boarding of vessels was originally certified by GOSH. However, aircraft boarding was not. Aircraft boarding presents noise and exhaust fume, physiological discomforts at the time the aircraft approaches the air bridge or jetway. The aircraft and surface conveyance boarding officer is Guam's true first line of defense. Upon the opening of the aircraft door, the officer is immediately exposed to potential communicable diseases such as H1N1, swine flu, H7N1, influenza type A, SARS, tuberculosis, and other contagious diseases, as well as potential for other pandemics. A logical fallacy might be, aren't the other people who work for the airlines equally exposed? The fallacy in that thought is the contagion or hazard is not neutralized or eliminated by the presence of others. This is part of the reason Guam Customs restricts the number of people that can be in the jetway or air bridge during aircraft door opening. The same exposures and boarding restrictions hold true for vessel boarding. C. During the time of active detector dog handling in cargo, passenger, mail, prison, house raid, or other canine search operations. As a former canine handler and founder of the Guam Customs Detector Dog Unit, I am well aware of the hazards of utilizing a live animal to perform searches at the border. Although these animals and their handlers are highly trained, their work is performed in dirty or dusty areas, rough, uneven, and slippery surfaces, in close proximity to extremely loud aircraft engine noise and exhaust fumes. On sea vessels, traversing from deck to deck and up and down narrow ladders. Areas working the dog at heights above 50 feet where railings do little to prevent the detector dogs from slipping on water and oil slick decks and falling through wide guardrail spacing, potentially dragging his handler with him, or in warehouse elevated shelvings, etc. D. when performing site visits to business or suspected criminal violator establishments to detect violations of import-export laws or regulations. Anytime off-site border inspections are performed at locations away from secured inspection sites, the risk increases for officers to be overwhelmed and overpowered. Weapons on their possession, as well as weapons in the possession of criminals or terrorists, can be used to disable and injure officer. These circumstances exist as importers or businesses seek methods to reduce their costs by requesting for satellite inspections. The lack of a proper customs inspection facility and the ever-increasing levels of container and merchandise imports at the commercial port of Guam contribute to this problem. E. During the time of performing biosecurity enforcement activities such as agroterrorism, importation reconditioning that requires the use of chemicals, fumigations to eradicate pests, or re-inspections due to pest infestations. I think that these conditions in and of themselves are self-explanatory. Biosecurity officers are the Guam Customs Agency's primary response team for identification, control, and eradication of biosecurity threats and dangerous and venomous pests at Guam's ports of entry. As the biosecurity mission expands and evolves, exposure to virulent and pathogenic vectors, biological contaminants, and disease persists. Further information and extensive explanation of the hazards involving bloodborne pathogens can be found at U.S. OSHA's 29 CFR 1910.1030. F. During the time of performing active marine interdiction operations as a crew member of a customs or government official that is underway. This work activity was originally certified by GOSH and as well further ahead in my testimony. I will not expand in this area. G. During the time of performing inspection activities such as secondary baggage, cargo, mail, aircraft or watercraft vessels, passenger pat-downs, strip searches, internal body concealment exam procedures, other enforcement activities targeting border crimes or terrorism. Although this activity as described may appear redundant, these activities exude, extend, and encompass combinations of hazard explained in greater detail in other customs work activities. H. When performing criminal investigations requiring surveillance, arrests, controlled buys, controlled deliveries, house raids, undercover work, evidence gathering, and other criminal investigation activities recognized as hazardous by the director. This work activity was originally certified by GOSH and as well further ahead in my testimony. When performing container freight station or satellite hold inspections away from secured customs facilities. That is I. The justifications explained under Activity D equally apply to this activity. And J, while officers are utilizing or operating X-ray equipment in mobile X-ray vehicles as well as stationary X-ray machines. Exposure to leaking chemicals, triggering devices that could injure or kill by surprise, and dirty bombs are real exposure threats our X-ray teams might experience. K, when assigned to a federal law enforcement task force or special duty assignments such as to GPD or VIP security. Assignments of customs officers to federal or local task forces oftentimes pairs officers with officers from the Guam Police Department who are paid hazardous differential pay for the entire duty day, during which time customs officers perform exact duties, receive pay only for the periods of actual controlled deliveries and transport and custody of arrestees that was originally approved by GOSH. I'm asking for parity. So when GPD officers assigned to the task forces receive hazardous duty compensation for the full duty period, then Guam Customs officers also assigned to the task forces should receive similar compensation as their GPD counterparts. From the perspective of VIP security, and by summary of 4 GCA subsection 622, Superior Court of Guam marshals are entitled to hazardous duty pay for providing security for a justice, judge, or referee, so long as such justice, judge, or referee and the administrator of the court certify that such duty expose the employee to potentially dangerous circumstances. This statute provides a platform to request reasonable allowances for the Director of Guam Customs to also approve hazardous pay differential for customs officers performing VIP security or work-related duties involving exigent circumstances resulting in imminent danger of bodily injury to the employees or others, or exposure to potentially dangerous circumstances. And L, during the time of performing search and seizure of locations or persons, evidence discovery, handling, and/or processing. This activity exposes officers to dangerous substances, disease, and direct contact with criminals. As an industry comparison, the U.S. Government Office of Personnel Management presents a valid center of gravity by which to also base my justification for the approval of hazardous pay for the positions identified in Guam Customs as TOO. Their official website can be found at, and it's listed there, for short, the www.opm.gov. I provide this for ease of reference and source identification. The specific page of review presented the U.S. Office of Personnel Management's frequently asked questions concerning pay and leave, and specifically hazardous duty. The site provides the following information as a reference: 5 CFR Part 550, Subpart 1, Appendix A to Subpart 1 of Part 550, described as schedule of pay differentials authorized for hazardous duty under Subpart 1. Under the major section entitled Exposure to Hazardous Weather or Terrain, specifically in Sections 1, Work in Rough and Remote Terrain, when working on cliffs, narrow ledges, or near vertical mountainous slopes, where loss of footing would result in serious injury or death, or when working in areas where there's a danger of rock falls or avalanches. Our officers assigned to the Marine Interdiction Task Force perform coastal patrols and are specifically exposed to this condition when they are not at sea performing vessel boarding at sea. Although not identical in language, 2, traveling under hazardous conditions when travel over secondary or unimproved roads to isolated mountaintop installations is required at night, or under adverse weather conditions such as snow, rain, or fog, which limits visibility to less than 30 meters when there is danger of rock, mud, or snow slides. Now, I mentioned that it's not exact in language, but I'm pretty sure we are all too familiar with typhoon conditions that place our officers under similar circumstances. In past typhoons, our Marine Interdiction Task Force was instructed to perform verification of major roadway passes to assist our GPD counterparts through their use of agency equipment capable of traversing fallen obstacles, typhoon debris, and flooded areas. And number 4, water search and rescue operations. Participating as a member of a water search and rescue team in adverse weather conditions when winds are blowing at 56 kilometers per hour or 35 miles per hour, classified as gale winds, or in water search and rescue operations conducted at night. Our Marine Interdiction Task Force could find themselves operating under similar conditions. And number 6, hazardous boarding or leaving of vessels when duties A, B, or C are performed under adverse conditions of foul weather, ice, or night, and when the sea state is high, 0.9 meters, 3 feet, and above. To summarize A, B, and C, our officers performing vessel clearance and boarding experience these hazards consistently at the Port Authority of Guam. Our vessel boarding activities require officers to move personnel and equipment, and sometimes canines, from dock to vessel, and many times over unsecured planks and hopping from one vessel to another when vessels are aligned side by side against the pier or dock, which sometimes is a moving or floating pier or dock. In courtesy to others, I wrote this in advance, so there's nobody actually listed right on the sign-up sheet there, Mr. Chairman, right, to testify?
Just Major Darlene.
Okay, so I'll continue. In courtesy to others wishing to provide testimony on Bill 351-33, from this point forward, I will simply read the hazardous exposure conditions. Exposure to hazardous agents, work with or in close proximity to explosive or incendiary materials which are unstable and highly sensitive. Toxic chemical materials when there is a possibility of leakage or spillage. Virulent biologicals, materials of microorganic nature which when introduced into the body are likely to cause serious disease or fatality, and for which protective devices do not afford complete protection. Along the same line of thought, I'm just going to insert an impromptu entry here, because talking with my counterparts from the Homeland Security Investigation Service, I was provided information about fentanyl. And fentanyl is a opioid derivative, right, drug, and it is a painkiller. And folks that are addicted to heroin and drugs of that family will oftentimes resort to fentanyl to satisfy their cravings. Now, fentanyl in and of itself is perilous for humans, even in very small quantities. And so along those same lines, our customs officers, if they're performing inspections at the border, whether it just be a simple baggage inspection or even a pat-down, could potentially come in contact with fentanyl, and they might have the exposure to the conditions that could resulted in its most extreme state, death. Height work. Working on any structure of at least 15 meters, 50 feet above the base level, ground, deck, floor, roof, etc., under open conditions. If the structure is unstable or scaffolding guards or other suitable protective facilities are not used, or performed under adverse conditions such as snow, sleet, ice on walking surfaces, darkness, lighting, steady rain, or high wind velocity. This is but a short list of hazardous exposures customs officers experience. As I contemplate the duties customs officers perform daily at our borders, the reality that sets in for me is the physical hardship and the real yet uncertain threat of WMD and terrorism at the border. When a logical analysis is performed of the mission of the customs agency, one must seriously consider if we are charged to safeguard Guam against such treachery, then to perform our job effectively would cause absolute exposure. To close, and to provide two industry standards, I present a question asked and answered on the U.S. Office of Personnel Management's webpage. The question is, if an employee performs a hazardous duty, as listed in Appendix A, for an hour during the work shift, does he or she receive the hazard pay differential for only that hour? The response provided was no. When an employee performs the duty for which a hazard pay differential is authorized, the agency must pay the hazard pay differential for all of the hours in which the employee is in pay status on the day on which the duty is performed. That's 5 CFR 550.905. The other standard is the differential percentage comparison. The government of Guam's hazardous duty differential is 10%, but the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, or OPM standard for hazardous pay differential is 25%. Perhaps our government might consider adopting similar best practices. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Do you have any questions for me, Senator?
I don't right now, Senator. Maybe we should hear first from Major Murfallen.
Good afternoon, Honorable Senator Thomas Ayeta, Chairman of the Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Lands, Border Protection, Veterans Affairs and Procurement, and committee members. My name is Major Darlene Murfallen. I am currently the Acting Director of the Customs and Quarantine Agency. On behalf of Director James McDonald, he would like to thank this committee for considering and assisting us in trying to get our hazardous pay. Buenos Janhafade. The employees of the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency appreciate the opportunity to participate in the hearing of Bill 35133 COR. Please find attached the table of organization corresponding to the description of the employee positions within the Customs and Quarantine Agency identified by the Director for entitlement to hazardous pay differential or hazardous duty pay. Please accept the attachment as the agency's exhibit in support of Bill 351-333. I know that Major Tyron and I are the only ones that sign up to testify, but we have over 80-some signatures from employees of our agency, both uniform and civilian, that are in support of Bill 351-33. Major Tyron has come more or less went into detail to hopefully answer your questions on Table 3 of the Table of Hazardous Duty Pay Authorization, which can be found in page 405. In the event you do not have this exhibit in front of you, I will turn this in and they'll make copies for your review. I did make inquiry if they wanted to photocopy prior to my testimony, and they said go ahead and provide your testimony and I could submit it to the
Yeah, we'll
your
have the
staff.
committee make copies of this and we'll send it out to the members of the committee.
Yes. So it's just very short. The table is basically what is required for us. I know you might have questions later on for other explanation, and we'll be more than willing to answer whatever questions you have, if not today, through correspondence with our agency. There were certain sections of our agency employees that were receiving hazardous pay. But with this Bill 351-33, we are hoping that there's equity on hazardous pay compensation to all customs officers performing hazardous duty. And we will try and attain that. That is our goal, to try and have that balance in our agency.